when I'm thinking about autism, there's obviously, you know, with my daughter, as we went through, what's left in my daughter is like a beautiful mind that views the world differently. But actually, all of those symptoms that we started with, and they are symptoms, they're not part of her personality, they're all caused by specific things. And if we can look at all of those different areas, and we can cover lots of this as we go through, like podcasts and all of this information, there are specific bacterias and fungi and other infections and other imbalances that make up this thing that we call autism, where actually that isn't really true autism, because that's just a load of imbalances in the body that are making up these symptoms that we actually call autism. So, and Clostridia is like one big player in that. And I see this is a bacteria that is found in the gut, and I see this probably on, I would say 70% plus of the lab testing that I see is part of the picture typically for our kids. And I'm just going to sort of explain a bit about kind of what Clostridia is and like where it's found and how our children get it, and then the impacts that it has on our kids and some of the symptoms that you might see to know whether this is an issue for your child. And then actually I can give you some of the examples of the testing that you can do to ascertain, and the best form of testing to ascertain whether your child does have Clostridia, because not all testing is as good as the other, and some are a lot more efficient and accurate at showing us this bacteria in its true form. So basically, Clostridia is a type of bacteria. There are around 100 species of Clostridia, and some are actually commensal. They're part of our microbiome and they should be there. And then there are pathogenic forms, which are disease-causing forms of this bacteria. And some that you might have heard of if you've been on this journey and you've been doing research and things like that. You've got Clostridium difficile, so C. diff. That's one of the most common forms that's found in like the children that I see, but there are other forms as well. So another one that I find a lot is Clostridia botulinum, and I'll talk about sort of what the impacts that they have on the body and sort of how that presents in symptoms in our children. So Clostridia is found in like animal feces and in water also. And honestly, what I find a lot with our kids is because their immune system is lower, there's stress in the body, there might be other depletions in gut bacteria. Things like Clostridia and yeast, which is another topic I think we can cover, because that's found a lot in our kids also, is it's opportunistic, so it can kind of take over when like the immune system's lower, there's stress in the body, the diet is poor, and there's not enough nutrients in the body to be robustly healthy and to fight off anything. And also if there's very depleted gut bacteria, so if there's been antibiotic use, for an example, or if the diet is very poor, so if the diet is really high in refined white carbohydrate, which is like most of the children that come in, are living off that diet, because obviously that's kind of like part of the picture of our kids, where they're like, they don't like trying new foods and they're very drawn to those kinds of like safe, beige, non-flavored foods. So that can be some of the causes of why this happens. So like I said, depleted microbiome after antibiotics, and antibiotics, when if a child does have them, they can trigger the release of some of the clostridial toxins also. And it's actually the toxins that Clostridia produces that can be sort of like the most harmful thing. So how does this sort of happen? So you've got your beneficial bacteria, the antibiotics kill those off, it catalyzes the release of toxins from Clostridia, and it alters the immune system over time so that it suppresses it. So then obviously you can't fight off any of the bacteria that is kind of taking hold. This can also come down from a maternal kind of line, and I hate saying that part, because then it kind of makes people feel awful that, oh, I've caused my child's autism, which we know is not the truth, and it's never to like put blame on any of us, because we've got enough we have enough to carry when we're dealing with a child with additional needs anyway. So I don't want to put guilt or like shame on anybody, but if your microbiome is depleted or there are clostridial bacteria or fungus there, obviously our children inherit our microbiome, and that doesn't mean to say that every person who has a wonky microbiome will have a child with autism. That is not how it works. However, we know that the microbiome is important. And if this is why we always talk about, like, before conception, it's really important to get your microbiome in a healthy state. Most of you listening will already have a child with additional needs or autism, so obviously you can't go back and do anything about that now, so it's pointless even thinking about it. But it's just to know that these can be some of the causes of this. And obviously if there's really high stress in the child's body, then it will suppress immune system, and then Clostridia is more able to take hold. And of course the diet is like critical for this. The other thing I find a lot when children have clostridial overgrowth, this bacteria and fungus in yeast also, is so when a child is born, they might have reflux, and then what the doctors will do, they'll put PPIs in. They'll put in like a omeprazole, I think it's called, and it's a proton pump inhibitor, so it just inhibits stomach acid. Because what the sort of theory behind it from an allopathic perspective is that if a child has reflux, it means they have too much stomach acid. We know that's not actually the case, and it's more that the child is sensitive to probably the milk that they're drinking, and then the body is trying to eject that via reflux, and that's kind of why that happens. And so we put a PPI in, which basically like completely suppresses and inhibits stomach acid. And obviously there is no gatekeeping there in the gut to kill off any pathogens, because the whole point of stomach acid is of course to break down food, but it's also to kill off unwanted pathogenic disease causing bacteria when we eat food with that on it. So if we have none of that, then of course Clostridia, yeast, anything else, parasites that wants to kind of take hold can do that, because that sort of initial defense is not there. And I find that very often when I go through history with children, there will be this kind of pattern where it's like, you know, there was reflux or some sort of like, you know, profuse vomiting or gut issue. They put PPIs in, and then sort of this cascades into like overgrowth of unwanted bacteria and fungus, and that happens very, very often.